This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Today welcoming back Rhode Island Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea for another conversation on her gubernatorial run, this time from the perspective of one of the two frontrunners in the race, that according to the latest polling data, something that is certainly going to shape the approach and dynamics of this race. No question about it. When you look at the latest numbers, which are admittedly a few, what are they, about 6 weeks old now, Secretary Gorbea and Governor McKee clearly out in front of the others in the Democratic primary, those being Helena Bonanno-Folkes, Matt Brown, and Luis Daniel Munoz, Dr. Munoz. And today we discuss some things that really differentiate the Secretary from Governor McKee in terms of housing, in terms of economic development, specifically with her approach to the Tidewater Landing Project, and much more. So that is all ahead here on Bartholomew Town as I keep talking about it like the ramp up into the political season. We're here. I mean, this is it. We are in politics season in Rhode Island, and I'm excited about it. I hope you are as well. We're going to have a lot of profiles with a lot of different candidates, certainly at the state level and the federal race in terms of the congressional race, but also some local stuff, the General Assembly, municipal races, so on and so forth. And that'll be our primary focus as we move forward towards the primaries in September and then the general this coming November. So this past weekend was PVD Fest. I have to say it was completely magical. It was such a great time. I had an amazing time performing, and there's some great photos and videos in today's Boston Globe of the entire event, including my performance. And I've posted a bunch of stuff all over social media at Bill Bartholomew. And one of the best parts about it for me was meeting so many of you. It was so cool after my set to have people come up and be like, hey, I'm this listener, I'm this caller to the talk radio show, or I'm whatever. And it was so cool to just humanize some of you out there and have some conversations. And I don't know, it was just a really magical time. I think PVD Fest it's a major event, obviously, in the state, but it's becoming more and more representative of what I think we want Providence to become. I'm not saying that PVD Fest should take place every single weekend, but that integration, that downtown activity, that celebration of the arts, that celebration of what makes Providence unique, the characters, the energy, it was on full display. So if you missed out, make sure you're there next year, because it was just so great to walk around and talk to all of you that were there and came up, and that was just a true pleasure and brought a real smile to my face. But also some of our leaders that were out there. I had a great chat with Colonel Hugh Clements, Providence Police Chief Clements, so many others on the city council, state officers, you name it. It was just awesome. Totally awesome weekend, and congratulations to everybody involved in that, from Mayor Lorz's office to all the different artists that came in, to First Works, the organizers of that event on the artistic side. It was logistically an awesome event. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you have something that's so big and so varied and has so many different modes happening, so many different engines firing all at once, that things can get lost or confusing or, annoying, whatever it may be. It was just a beautiful event. It was freaking awesome. So I just want to thank everybody who was involved in that and everybody who said hello this weekend and came out for my performance, which was kind of early. It was at 2 o'clock on Saturday, and it just meant a lot. It was just super cool. Can't thank you enough. And lots more of that ahead on the music side for me. And let's hope a lot more ahead on the Providence side in general that reflects what we saw at PVD Fest and experienced this past weekend at PVD Fest. Because when we talk about Providence here on the podcast or anywhere, there's so much, obviously, that is unrelated specifically to PVD Fest, whether you're talking housing, education, economic development, whatever it is, right? It's not directly related to an arts and culture type event. But it's directly tied in the sense of the beautiful city that we all want to celebrate. If we have all those points covered simultaneously, we improve the schools, we improve the housing situation, we spark economic development that's organic and robust, and we find a way to marry all the different interests that are swirling. Providence has a chance to stand out, I think, in a way that would make it one of the top cities in the country. and in many ways it already is. I mean, I love Providence. I'm here to celebrate it. I'm not saying that, that it's not a great place. But if we're being honest about it, there's a lot we can do to continue to build it. And we saw it this past weekend at PVD Fest. Lots coming up on B-Town this month, including Inside Rhode Island Public Health, presented by Commonwealth Care Alliance, who are delivering uncommon care to Rhode Islanders. That's coming up later this month. Plus, Inside Rhode Island Cannabis, presented by Pure Vita Labs. Visit purevitalabs.com to learn more about analytical testing in cannabis. And, boy, has that shifted, right? Cannabis in Rhode Island in the last couple of weeks, huh? So that's creating a very interesting mode for us to get into as we break down what's going on in that sector, which I would argue is an emerging super sector. There's obviously the social justice and medical components of cannabis, but it's going to be an economic driver for sure as we move along. Okay, without further ado, let's get to it. My latest conversation with Rhode Island Secretary of State and gubernatorial candidate Nellie Gorbea here on Rhode Island's podcast of record, Bartholomew Town. All right, Secretary Gorbea, you are in an interesting position, arguably one of two, if not the front runner, depending on how you look at the polling, in a gubernatorial race that's now entering a summer season where I don't want to say it cools off a little bit in terms of public attention, but it shifts. How do you sustain that momentum going into September? You're in this position now that's fairly favorable as any outsider would observe it.
Well, thank you, Bill, for engaging with me this morning. I have to say that it's been wonderful to see how excited people are about my candidacy for governor. I feel the energy and excitement every time I go out. And, part of it has to do with, the longstanding roots that I have as a community member. For the last 30 years, I've been a part of a variety of nonprofit groups. I've been in the leadership of many of them. And then now as an elected official, I'm not starting for a place where nobody knows who I am or what I've done. It's a pretty transparent career, and it's a career of public service. And people are looking for leadership that is going to take care of them and is going to move our state forward. And so that's what they see when they see my work and they see that I'm now, going for governor.
I think you can make the same argument in some cases about Governor McKee. I guess on a policy level, how would you differentiate yourself from Governor McKee just in that 30-second elevator pitch type of format?
I think that while, I think that the basic difference is in our leadership and in the results that leadership has brought about. In the last 7.5 years, you see that I've transformed the Department of State from a sleepy filing cabinet into an agency that works for people. Whether you're a small business owner and you want to get your business started and grow it in Rhode Island, my office has been, changed to really be there for you. If you see how voters were able to access their democracy nowadays in Rhode Island, you'll see that we're now a national leader. And so when I talk to people about growing our economy in Rhode Island in a way that's more equitable and just, they have a track record that they can see that I really mean when I say that I'm going to do something and I'm going to get it done.
Something that you brought up at one of the recent forums, I can't remember which one it was describing how during the 2020 thick of the pandemic, when a lot of government, particularly social service agencies, slowed down, Rhode Island actually experienced record filing for new corporations. And through your office, you were able to facilitate that. You argued that you could then take that experience and facilitate, whether it be whatever social service processing would take place, you could take that same system and apply it to other sectors of government. Expand on that a little bit, because that's a very interesting notion.
So what we've done at the Department of State is to very simply invest in our public sector infrastructure, meaning our cyber, hardware, software systems. We've invested in our people who are our biggest, asset as a government. And we've listened to the people who are receiving services, the people who are working with the people receiving services, and our own employees. And from that, you get a government that works. And I think that that's what we need to do. The biggest difference between a UHIP deployment and what you've seen under my leadership at the Department of State in terms of like probably half a dozen IT the development of a half a dozen IT systems that have improved the way government works for people is that I use that leadership style to listen to the people on the ground, to invest in the resources that are needed, to make those changes and to move that forward. So I feel very comfortable saying that, look at what I've done as Secretary of State. If you like what I've done, if you're a small business owner, you're a voter, you're somebody who's passionate about open government and how transparent government should be, then that's what you're going to be seeing in a Gorbea administration now focused on growing the economy, addressing our housing crisis, addressing the quality of education in our state, and addressing climate change.
I remember attending a protest at the Board of Elections, attending as a member of the media, I should say, after the 2020 election. And people were, I think some people were confused about what your role is in the process or anything like that. But there's people out there that are saying, wait a minute, Rhode Island's, the voter rolls are corrupt and there's going to be, 50,000 per municipality. Well, there's not 50,000 residents in every municipality, but there's going to be many dead people voting or whatever it is. What do you say to those critics?
I say, please come into my office so we can sit down with you and actually walk you through everything. We've done that with a number of people, and they've walked away with a much better understanding of what are the checks and balances that we have. A lot of what's happening is, unfortunately, people are listening to mainstream media in their own silos, and they don't understand how different Rhode Island's checks and balances are. And so, I have talked to people in the legislature, for example, who were very much opposed to online voter registration. And my approach was to sit down with that person and say, come in, we're going to have a deep down conversation. You're going to try to register online in Vermont and New Hampshire. And when that legislator was not able to, and we talked about all the different ways in which we have security in the system, we won him over. And on the way out, I said, you and I both agree on a very critical thing, which is we need to have integrity in our elections. And you have my word that I will maintain that. And so that, we have that one point of commonality. Just, trust that this approach that I'm taking, will work. And if not, hold me accountable. But we need to have a lot more speaking with each other, engaging with each other, than yelling at each other or just blogging away in our silos.
No question about it. Let's get into some specific issues. You've done a pretty good job in each of the two forums, and I think in general of straddling this nebulous line between being a somewhat of a centrist and somewhat of a progressive. I don't think anyone could pin you down in either quote unquote silo. How do you maintain that? Because on the one hand, you're able to speak to the business community with command, but you're also able to address those who are concerned about the housing crisis with a keen understanding. And it's an interesting balance that I'm not sure any of the other candidates have in the Democratic primary have been able to do. Talk about that a little bit and just straddling that line.
Well, I think that it's because it's a line that really is, it's one that pundits love to, throw around, and labels are, I think, really not where how people think. So when I speak with voters, what they want to know is, how are they going to be able to grow their business? How, are they able to send their kids to schools? How are they going to be able to afford healthcare? How are they going to be able to afford a tank of gas to get them to work? And so when you speak to people's concerns, you're able to engage with them in a way that they understand that they may not agree with you 100% on everything, but they know that in a Gorbea administration, they will be taken care of. That's what people want out of their government, is they want to get their needs met, so that they can go about their lives and grow, whatever activities it is that they want, like in terms of a business or go to work or whatever. So I feel that it's my pragmatic approach to change that is really sort of at the core of how I do things, and it works right now in terms of where people are. These are really, really challenging times. We need leadership in the governor's office that is able to actually straddle a wide variety of people, as large a number of people, and particularly going into the November election, where we do have a Republican candidate, and we can't take things for granted. So as hopefully the standard bearer for the Democratic Party, I look forward to being, the best candidate that's really going to make sure that we keep this seat as a Democratic governor.
Let's talk about housing. And right now it's been years in the making, but we seem to be at a genuine housing crisis where there's an unhoused population. There's a middle class population that frankly is having a hard time paying rent or being able to purchase a home. You've even got a situation brewing that some economic analysts, and even when you crunch data as a layperson, you can say, boy, there's a pending bubble. These houses that people are buying for $1.5 million that were $600,000 a year and a half ago, that seems like we're heading for a danger zone. So where do you start addressing the housing crisis? Is it rezoning so you can build more multifamily? Is it incentivizing the private sector? Is it more of a public sector development type of project? Where does this all begin?
Look, there are a number of ways in which we are able to address the housing crisis. And let me say that it is absolutely my number one issue, because housing is essential to your health, to your education, to your ability to be part of the economy. So, and people are not secure in their housing, or they're spending too much on their housing, it affects a number of issues or areas in their own lives. So what we need to do is, well, first of all, I was glad to see the speaker put in the bill to create the Secretary of Housing. I'm going to call it Secretary of Housing and Community Development, because I think the two are interconnected. And this person's going to be my point person, but I'm going to be a hands-on governor on this. I know from my time as Executive Director of Housing Works, Rhode Island, that a lot of the barriers are not just in the funding, although I'm very glad to see funding for low-income housing and affordable housing be developed and implemented, starting with the Raimondo administration. But we can't subsidize our way out of this crisis. We need to absolutely restructure our zoning laws. We need to work with the cities and towns in a way that incentivizes them to do denser, sustainable housing that is available to people. Now, we've got a number of projects that if we had money for the historic preservation tax credit could get built, like that are shovel ready. So we need to put some money into that as well. So it's going to be several strategies at the same time happening, so that we can get some development going. By the way, and we have a great sector, both in the private and nonprofit sectors, that are rearing to go to build that housing. I believe that we could become the builder of New England if we play our cards right during this crisis, by showing that we know how to build sustainable, quality, affordable housing, market rate stuff.
What about for those who are unhoused right now? There's simply not enough beds in talk about shelters or anything like that. What do we do?
So, fortunately, I was just having a conversation actually with Crossroads, and they're in the process of really expanding and breaking ground, hopefully soon, on a big SRO facility that they're building just near where their tower currently is, on Broad Street. So facilitating development of that kind of building will absolutely be key. The other piece of this is, and I learned it during my time at Housing Works, what we need is permanent supportive housing. That is housing that is tied to social services, so that you house the person first. And once you stabilize them, because they're in housing, then you are able to provide the supportive services. That approach has been shown to be hugely successful. Like, I'm talking, 75% of the people who go into this who have been homeless for more than 7 years don't go back on the streets because they've been able to be stabilized. And so that's the kind of investments. So that's why I want to do a Secretary of Housing and Community Development, because there has to be a community aspect to the housing. It's not, you start with housing the person, but then you have to marry the resources that the state has for social services, which leads me to another issue that's interconnected with all of this, which is the state absolutely needs to clean up its act in how it supports the nonprofit agencies out on the ground doing the hard work. We need to look at the pay rates for those services. and we need to make sure that the state is not holding on to payments for months and months and months and starving nonprofits of doing the good work that they need to be doing in the community.
On economic development, right now, there's a major project that is continuously, it seems like every couple of days is evolving, and that is Tidewater Landing. If you were governor, what would your advice be? What would your position be on whether it be expanding the TIF, whether it be finding additional new money to put towards Tidewater Landing? Are you overall in favor of the project? How do you manage something like that?
Well, let me just say that in general, we have to be very careful when we do sports facilities and with public dollars. I mean, they're a pretty classic nonprofit. A pretty classic public administration case that they, on their own, they don't generate enough to compensate for the subsidy. Tidewater is an interesting case though, because it's a sport that's very forward facing. It's just soccer, which has gotten a lot more interest in the community than others, for example, and that is growing in its popularity. And it's married to a number of development projects that should be happening. I would be looking first and foremost to greater private sector partners and figuring out a way, because you always want to try to do that first. But it is a project that the reason it needs more monies are the same reasons that everything else needs more money right now, which is that inflation has sadly hit us across the board. And so I understand that this is not a case of cost overruns because it's been mismanaged, which is a totally different issue. But yeah, I would be looking first and foremost at the private sector before I engaged further on public sector subsidies, or looking at the sharing of, if we are going to go public sector, looking at the sharing of the uptick eventually. So that the public sector also has something to gain when there's an uptick on the project.
Very interesting. Superman building. It's an interesting project. It could reform downtown Providence. I've made the argument though that it's for a certain sector of people that probably don't even live in Providence right now, save for the 20% affordable housing. But where do you stand on that project?
Yeah, I have said that I am very concerned. Look, I get the Superman building is a great building. All things being equal, do I want to see it redeveloped? Absolutely. But the problem is the cost, right? And what do you give up in exchange for that cost to this one developer who honestly, had a deal go south on him? And so, what's really going to transform downtown Providence is completely reinvesting in our Providence public schools.
Yes.
If we had a Providence public school system that was doing much better for its kids, we would have all sorts of development happening in downtown in the blink of an eye. And so a building in and of itself is not going to do that. So I am concerned about the amount of money that's being pledged into the future. That I honestly would prefer to see tackle what are really the harder issues, which is things like education.
No question about it. I agree completely on the education piece, and I think anybody would looking in from the outside. On the state takeover, Commissioner Infante Green has suggested that about 2027 is when we might see the state return control of the district to the city. As governor, what would your initiatives look like in terms of administrating the Providence school system, and how quickly would you like to see it go back to the city of Providence's control? So
let me just say that, the Providence school system is key to not just Providence, but to the development of the state. I thank the good people in that system that have stayed with it day in, day out. Taking care of our kids during really challenging times. Providence, as Central Falls as well, should be afforded the opportunity to be like any other community and represent and lead their own, school districts. I don't believe that the state takeover should continue forever and ever and ever. But what I will do as governor is to sit down with all the different parties, including the ones who don't talk to each other, and work out a way in which we can fast forward that the improvements, that we can really communicate what are the successes that might be happening right now that nobody knows about, because I think that's part of the problem as well. And then really tackle the places where we're not moving and putting some real resource and attention into it. Providence is our capital city, and it really, if we can turn Providence school systems around, it has a huge economic impact for the state as well as for the lives of all the people who live here.
Last question, Department of Health. It's hard to tie the departure of interim director Dr. McDonald to a broader, systemic issue or something like that, because it seems like he's, got family issues that makes sense why he's leaving to go to upstate New York. But, you look back, the departure of Dr. Alexander Scott, the departure of Tom McCarthy, we've seen critical, in fact, extremely critical former members of the Department of Health sort of lashing out against the COVID approach of Governor McKee. What's your assessment of the Department of Health? How would you handle that? And what would you be looking for in a director?
Yeah, no. So I have to first and foremost say thank you to the awesome people who do their jobs over the Department of Health and have done so through extraordinarily difficult circumstances over the last 3.5 years. Now with this vacuum in leadership, we have a real problem in that we have what I call government by inertia, right? When you don't have the leadership to drive people to sort of what is it that we're supposed to be doing next, you end up getting government by inertia, which sadly has been the case, I think, over the last 14 months. You can look at the types of people that I hire. You've seen that track record over the last 7.5 years. I would be looking at somebody who's, a really amazing professional. They don't necessarily have to be, glamorously famous or anything like that. But you want somebody who can talk with others, who can engage with others. And I would be speaking to the various stakeholders, right? The doctors, the nurses, all of the different people who are affected by the Department of Health, the businesses, for example, the restaurants, like to try to figure out, okay, what does that director of health of now have to be in order to really address the needs of the people that they're supposed to be serving. So we'll do a really quick survey of all the stakeholders, put a search team together, and in a very transparent way, just get this person hired and get this going, because we need to move very quickly.
Secretary Gorbea running for governor of Rhode Island. We've got how many months to go until the primary? Quick math here. What, 3?
3.
Wow.
If only it could be tomorrow.
Yeah, and then enjoy the rest of the summer. That would be. Do you think primary should be held earlier? Is it here in Rhode Island?
I actually had a bill to move it to June. If you look at most states, there's a much bigger space in between the primary and the general election. It came from my own experience waking up one morning during my first race in 2014 in September going like, oh my gosh, I have to get the kids to school stuff.
Yeah.
When am I fitting that in? And so, it's funny, structures really do weed out certain people from running. And so, I say that, partly jokingly, but it's true, right? Yeah. If you have kids and you need to now take care of, that in addition to a race, and we should have people who are working parents be elected official as well. Having your primary right smack as schools are starting, it is a disincentive, and one that people talk about like others, but still, it's the death by 1,000 paper cuts that kind of says to people, yeah, you don't really want to run. And I want more people running, more diversity, more, demographic, all sorts of diversity running for office and being elected, because our best solutions are when we have a diversity of people with different backgrounds, perspectives around the policymaking table, making sure that we capture as much of the will of the people as possible in delivering a government that works for them.
Want more Bartholomew Town? Follow me on social media at Bill Bartholomew for daily digital content.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.